My name is Rohan Belahal, and I'm really interested in biology and bioinformatics. And I was mentored by Praveen. So for this presentation, it's going to be sectioned off into the abstract introduction, then the background, next methods, calculations, and then results. So starting off with the abstract introduction. This study evaluates the effectiveness of flapgates as a coastal flood mitigation measure in Atlantic City using 35 years of hourly water levels. By applying flood scenarios with and without the presence of a 2.0 meter threshold flapgate, the calculations calculate flood frequency and inland water level reductions. Observations indicate that there are a significant decrease in the frequency of floods from 8,774 unprotected days to a mere 199 days when the flapgate was functioning, demonstrating the gate's ability to absorb low to moderate magnitude floods. Statistics, however, also indicate that high magnitude flood events can overtop the gate, pointing out that overtopping levels and maximum water levels should be examined above the mean when determining infrastructure resilience. This research integrates statistical modeling and Python simulation to inform adaptive coastal defense design, providing insight into the true performance and capacity of flapgate systems in flood-exposed zones. Did you say something? Estuaries are dynamic coastal environments that create brackish conditions, harbor high biodiversity, and provide important ecosystem services by combining fresh water from rivers with salt water from the ocean. So, as you can see on the left, this is an estuarine going down into the ocean. So, hypothetically, right, this lower part where you see a little bit of tan at the bottom of this picture is the mountain, right? And water is going to be flowing down and connecting into the ocean that is viewed at the top of the image. Too much salt water in an estuary, this region, would have a major influence on the ecosystems in these freshwater environments in a harmful manner. A hidden detail about seawater flowing into estuaries is that the salt water seeps into the ground or freshwater marshes, which has a profound impact on the plants and other parts of the ecosystem. And if these plants were a crop, there would be a severe deficit in the economy because those farmlands wouldn't produce the same amount of quality of crops as they did before. Continuing with the economic concerns promoted by estuary flooding, many people may also be in danger. According to NOAA, nearly 40% of Americans live near or on an estuary, which is responsible for 47% of the country's economic output and supports more than 59 million jobs. So, with estuary flooding, this is a very severe problem that can very easily tear apart our economy and how our society functions. So this is why we need to fix this problem before it becomes a much bigger problem. So the hydraulic efficiency or efficacy of a flapgate system intended to avoid estuarine flooding while permitting natural flow conditions during typical tidal cycles is assessed in this study. An analysis simulates the impact of a flapgate placed inside a built-in earthen embankment at the estuarine mouth using long-term hourly water level data from the estuary, with an emphasis on a 2.0 meter threshold to represent the operational height of a proposed embankment and flapgate system. The main goal was to model how various water level thresholds would affect the frequency of overtopping. To provide ecological connectivity, a fish ladder was incorporated within the embankment construction to allow for fish passage for the estuary to the ocean and vice versa. The always open channel fish ladder is used when the main flapgate are shutting during high tides or storm surges. and it represents a slight compromise in terms of flood protection. Because the latter allows the entry of a minimal quantity of water inland, there is a potential incidence of minimal volume of tidal flooding through this path. This effect is reduced by designing the ladder with a minor cross-section relative to the greater diameter of the 1.5-meter diameter, and by positioning the oceanside entrance slightly above the mean high tide level. This means the flow can travel through the ladder only at times of high water levels that coincide with natural times of fish migration, and not permit everyday tidal flooding. While the incorporation of the ladder reduces the overall flood defense scheme efficiency by only a small amount, its environmental benefit in sustaining fish stocks and estuarine biodiversity outweighs the slight increase in flood risk. The next slide will showcase the model presented on Tinkercad. So this is a 3D model that I created on Tinkercad. So it shows that the estuarine is right here, and this is the embankment in which the flatgates are placed into. You see two flatgates right here. Their diameter is 1.5 meters each, and the fish ladder is right here, presented with some fish. Now you can see there's a difference in the water fluctuation on this side compared to the side here. That's because this is the ocean and this is the river in the estuary. And the reason why I incorporated a fish ladder, right, is because I want the estuarine, flat gate to solve the problem and not create more problems, right? Because we're blocking the estuary with an embankment, fish can no longer pass through there, or they would have a very hard time passing through. Some fish, like some salmon and tuna, they would go up from the ocean up into the mountains to breed up there. But because this embankment is blocking the way, we would be impeding on their life cycle. So to not create more problems, we incorporated the fish ladder to ensure that there's a safe way for fish to travel upstream and downstream, while sacrificing a little bit of flood protection. Next is calculations. So this calculation is to figure out the water discharge through the flap gate. So first we start out with the 1.5 meter diameter, and we calculate the area of the pipe, and using a discharge coefficient and the gravity, we are allowed to figure out that the water discharge to the flap gate between the two flap gates is going to total out to 6.66 meters cubed per second. That's how much water can travel through the flap gates, and this is a sufficient amount that allows for great flood protection. That allows water to not stay in the estuary and to flow out into the ocean. So I just want to go back here just to make sure you can understand. The flap gates will not be open all the time, right? That's because there's not always a flood potential all the time. So during non-flood cases, the flap gates are going to be open so that water from the mountains can flow safely down into the ocean. But when there's a high tide and a lot of different waves, big waves, going to be a big flood, that's when the flap gates close, making sure that no water can go through and flood through this area. So after this is results. Now this graph presents the historical water level data from NOAA as the fluctuating light blue line as seen here. The average of this line is the dotted gray line, which you can see here. Next, the orange and blue lines on the right, over on this side of the graph, are the projected water levels based on the NOAA regression line. So essentially, this graph is conveying how the maximal water level will increase over time at a significant rate, reaching over 2 meters around 2027. So this graph is meant to emphasize the need to solve this problem, because if the water level keeps on going and going, that means that eventually water levels will soon drown estuaries near their connection to the ocean and rivers. That means that basically emphasizes that we need to solve this problem quickly and with a sufficient solution. Next, we have the yearly max water levels. This graph shows a comparison of yearly maximum water levels between conditions with and without the flapgate over a period from 1990 to 2025. It also includes a reference line for the flapgate threshold, which is 2.0 meters, which is represented by the height of flapgate used in simulation. So as you can see here, the blue line is without a flapgate and the orange line is with the flapgate. So all of these high points are flood incidents or flood accidents, right? The scenarios that have a flood. And without the flapgate, all of the high points are gonna reach 2.2, 2.1, all that high. But with the flapgate, most of these incidences result in only a 2.0, meaning that the flapgate will reduce most of these floods that are above the regular threshold. Now, this graph is to visualize how drastic the reduction is. So this bar graph shows what the impact would be if a flapgate were installed during the time this data was taken. So I took data from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Agricultural Association, and I took data from over 35 years. And I've used that in my graphs over here. And I wanted to see if we put the flapgate during that time, if it was implemented, right? How many floods would have been avoided and how many floods would have been there, right? So with the flapgate, there would be 8,774 flood days in Atlantic City. However, if there had been a flapgate installed, only 199 flood days would have occurred. This graph illustrates the drastic influence of a flapgate on the number of flood days over time. And that's the end of my presentation. YRI as a program, I think, is pretty good. Research idea was given effectively, and the pacing was adequate. I'm really interested in biology and bioinformatics, so I hope to one day be working in a lab, maybe with maybe genetic researching. And one great thing research does for college is that, like, it shows your initiative, right? That you're willing to take steps to work towards your goal and trying to, like, achieve that while still in high school. Really want to work in a research atmosphere, and this helps me get introduced into that atmosphere.